In recent weeks, you may have heard about Walgreens' plan to close 5 more stores in San Francisco. This, of course, after 17 others have closed in the city over the last 5 years, the company citing not just shoplifting as their reason for doing so, but organized shoplifting. We're not talking kids stealing candy bars. We're talking theft losses exceeding 5 times Walgreens' nationwide average, at least according to the company's claims. You've likely seen the white flag already raised as company policy, with security guards relegated to the role of spectator in a fancy jacket. They're practically criminal ushers. Right this way, sir. Please take your trash bag of stolen goods to the exit on your left, and we thank you for making Walgreens your preferred robbery choice. But that white flag isn't necessarily all on Walgreens. It's also a matter of politics and law. In 2014, California voters reclassified thefts under $950 as misdemeanors, meaning low-level, low-priority crimes. And as we'll get to, whether to pursue prosecution for these low-priority crimes is up in large part to the discretion of the prosecutor's office. When voters approve law and elect prosecutors that are lenient on crime, a relaxed response or no response to crime is a natural result. And of course, the ultimate relaxation is just to deny the issue entirely, as many of the city's power centers do. For example, the San Francisco Chronicle fact-checkers have looked into it and determined the truth about shoplifting in the city, and they say actually the data show no such issue with retail theft. According to police department numbers, one of the stores that Walgreens is closing had only 7 reported shoplifting incidents this year, and only 23 since 2018, and the 5 stores closing have reported fewer than 2 theft incidents a month on average since 2018. The mayor says it's not theft, but saturation that's pushing Walgreens out. They just have too many stores. And the city supervisor says Walgreens is abandoning the city. Okay, well, you do have to pick one there, because if there are too many Walgreens stores, then they aren't abandoning the city, they're actually over-serving it. But if they are abandoning the city, then saturation can't be the problem because there would be too few Walgreens stores in that situation. Regardless, numerical honesty is not the city's strong suit, because if you dig into the data, you can see that theft reports to police are probably not the best metric to use to assess the problem. Firstly, because what is one theft or one thief? Are they all equal? And can't one be hugely consequential? Last October, 5 people were arrested in a scheme of selling stolen goods on the street. The value of the assets recovered? $8 million. This is an industry in itself at this point. In May, a member of the Board of City Supervisors reported seeing half a Walgreens worth of stolen merchandise up for discounted resale in plain sight within 6 blocks of the store it was taken from. In this context, 1,000 thefts might actually be less consequential to the company than one organized, efficient, ongoing one. So theft reports are not a great measure of damage to business. Secondly, at what point of non-enforcement do businesses just give up and stop reporting the thefts at all? The same data that the Chronicle cites to show low shoplifting report numbers show similarly low rates of police solving these crimes. The SFPD itself says it solves only 2.8% of these cases. And that problem is beyond just the legal reality that the system doesn't treat these crimes seriously. It's also a product of raw manpower and resources, or a lack thereof. Even if the police are trying to do honest work, do they have enough officers to do it? San Francisco last summer was short 400 police officers. That's a shortage 12% worse than the year prior, and new applications aren't indicating numbers are likely to recover. New recruits are also in shorter supply. And any hope of justice for theft victims relies not just on police to investigate and arrest, but on prosecutors to pursue charges as well. And so similarly, even if prosecutors are trying to do an honest job, there have to be enough of them to do that. And the district attorney's office in San Francisco has also suffered staffing losses. About 1/3 of the DA's staff of prosecutors have quit or been fired in under 2 years' time. Without sufficient prosecutors to pursue cases, the decision to prosecute isn't just a matter of discretion, it's a matter of time and resource constraints as well. Still, despite these questionable results, embattled DA Chesa Boudin says he remains committed to 3 priorities.
We will do whatever it takes to prevent violence, to keep our community safe, and to hold those in power accountable.
It's always a good laugh when those in power vow to hold those in power accountable as though they're somebody else. An even better laugh when they persistently avoid even the most basic methods of accountability.
You've been avoiding our questions for months, sir. You have.
We waited for more than 2 hours until he was done speaking, but he still didn't want to talk with us.
What is it you're trying to avoid, Mr. District Attorney?
And so that accountability is being sought through other means. Now a recall effort has officially reached well over a critical mass of signatures necessary to force an election. The signatures still need to be verified, but assuming that they will be, that recall election against Chesa Boudin is likely to happen sometime in the spring or early summer. About 1 in 10 San Francisco residents signed the petition to recall, which is a sizable number. In fact, it was almost as many signatures for recall as voters who elected Boudin in the first place. But that's still a low threshold, and so it's not necessarily surprising that the signatures weren't all that difficult to get. I'm sure it was tougher to run the sidewalk obstacle course of shit and syringes to find people to sign than it was to convince them to sign. But what is surprising is it's not just disgruntled citizens driving this effort. It's actually members of Boudin's own staff, or now former members. This week, 2 prosecutors in the district attorney's office quit, not just in personal opposition to the philosophies and practices of their boss, but now in public activism to promote the recall effort against him. They're now speaking with media and delivering the shocking allegation that they think that Boudin's practice of returning criminals to the streets has actually been destructive to the city.
You honestly believe that the city's top law enforcement officer is actually making San Francisco more dangerous?
Yes.
Only within the bubble of that city could this be some sort of stunning revelation, but better late to the truth than never. Of course, the DA is calling these lawyers politically motivated, disgruntled employees, but neither one of them is sporting a red hat or cheering for Brandon. These are Brooke Jenkins and Don Dubain. Both are openly progressive prosecutors with decades of experience in San Francisco between them.
Being an African-American and Latino woman, I would wholeheartedly agree that the criminal justice system needs a lot of work. But when you are a district attorney, your job is to have balance. You can't simply focus on the defendant.
I thought he would be a reasonable, progressive, and thoughtful leader of the office. And unfortunately, I was wrong.
Just like Walgreens' saturated abandonment, when you say reasonable progressive, I'd argue you have to pick one. But these prosecutors are certainly entitled to their reasons, and reasons they certainly have. They both have stories of cases they personally worked on where criminals were released back to the streets, with sometimes fatal consequences. A man with 8 prior felony convictions was charged with robbery, but the DA let him go early. He was then arrested for 4 additional crimes. The DA never charged him. 9 months later, he hit and killed 2 women driving a stolen car drunk. In another case, Boudin ordered the prosecutor to request a more lenient sentence for a man convicted of shooting his girlfriend in the stomach. The prosecutor says such a thing would have been a violation of state laws governing criminal sentences. As a result, that prosecutor left the case, something he hasn't done in his entire career of over 130 jury trials spanning 30 years' time. And while these cases may be the result of a lenient philosophy on crime, according to these prosecutors, they are also the result of a cozy relationship with the public defender's office. Chesa Boudin formerly worked as a San Francisco public defender, and these prosecutors say even now that he's on the other side leading prosecutions, he still effectively takes his orders from the defense team.
If I would not simply agree to what was being requested of me with respect to resolution by a public defender, they were either expressly telling me that they would go directly to Chesa, or I would receive an email where Chesa was copied indicating that they wanted a particular outcome in the case.
So I want to be clear here. You're saying that lawyers in the public defender's office essentially are getting to boss around attorneys in the DA's office?
That's the way that it feels, yes.
Now, of course, both the prosecution and the defense are equally necessary to arrive at the ultimate goal of any justice system, which is the truth. So this is not to argue that the prosecution should be running roughshod over the defense either, but when the publicly elected prosecutor totally neglects his duty in that arrangement, you get the effect of citizens voting to put criminals in charge of bringing themselves to justice. And as unjust and as wrong-headed as that arrangement may be, not just for business, but for maintaining a livable city in general, there is a key phrase in that sentence: citizens voting. If you don't want criminals running your city, don't vote to put criminals in charge of your city, or at least for a guy who defers to them. Chesa Boudin bears responsibility for his prosecutorial decision-making, but voters bear responsibility for giving him those decisions in the first place, and voters bear the power to remove those decisions from him as well. And of course, I wouldn't get too optimistic for such a thing to happen, given the hype and the mild disappointment that was the California governor's recall election, but there are a few distinguishing factors here. Number one, Newsom Democrats aren't necessarily Boudin Democrats. There is a large constituency of local and state officials who vocally and publicly oppose the Newsom recall, but won't do the same for Boudin. And number two, Democrats didn't run any serious candidate to replace Newsom if he was recalled. And again, that may not be the case with Boudin. It's not like Boudin won in a landslide in San Francisco. He beat out another Democratic candidate by a percentage point and a half, a mere 3,000 votes. And this recall effort is led by Democrats, not Republicans or others. If Democrats are leading the charge to replace Boudin in this case, one would assume they will follow up with a serious candidate to get that accomplished. Now, of course, a so-called victory in that context may only mean that the Walgreens thief gets the more severe punishment of a slap on the wrist instead of the slap on his loot haul on the way out the door, but a step toward justice is still a step, no matter how small. Still, even for that minor correction in that city, I'll believe it when I see it, and I certainly won't hold my breath. Then again, if I lived there, maybe I would. Inhaling those sidewalk fumes is not advisable. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.